A chance on science. Good evening. Thanks for being here. I'm Mark Mullen.
I'm Catherine Garcia. A Scripps Ranch woman says she started feeling mild flu-like symptoms after her second dose of the Moderna vaccine. We're hearing her story just as two high-profile COVID-19 trials were put on pause this week. One of the developers reported an unexplained illness in its patients. As NBC 7's Lauren Coronado reports, the local volunteer says she's not deterred and is hoping her experience helps scientists inch closer to a solution.
The volunteer I spoke with says any of the symptoms she's experienced or might experience over the next few weeks are outweighed by the potential for a safe and strong COVID-19 vaccine for everyone.
People who volunteer for trials, they do it because they see being a part of the solution.
Debbie Honeycutt has lived in Scripps Ranch more than 30 years, volunteering for at least 6 clinical trials along the way.
I did a lot of things off the grid, so to speak.
Starting Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine trial last month.
I do have one underlying condition, and I'm over 65. I have a willingness to help.
And that's what it takes, because you're presented with a long list of warnings.
Everything and anything can happen to you if you develop a reaction. But the trials are monitored so well that if something did go wrong, I'd have all the support I needed to deal with it.
The worst it's gotten for Honeycutt thus far, mild flu-like symptoms after receiving her second dose of the vaccine.
Until the next day, probably about 9 o'clock, I suddenly was getting the chills, and I of course took my temperature as they directed. It went up to 100.1. So I just wrapped up and took it easy. It is a reaction that tells me perhaps I might have actually gotten the vaccine rather than the placebo.
Honeycutt says she was required to log her symptoms for 7 days, although she says she only felt ill for about half a day. But we know each person's body reacts differently. This week, 2 well-known trials put on pause. Johnson & Johnson vaccine developers reporting an unexplained illness. Hours later, Eli Lilly halting their antibody trial in an abundance of caution after potential safety concerns. But it doesn't worry Honeycutt.
It's working. The process works.
The vaccines and the antibody drug trials are actually a little bit different. So with respect to the vaccines, actually pausing the vaccine trial is pretty common.
Professor Greg Lemke is an immunobiologist with the Salk Institute.
That means they're paying very, very close attention to this. And that means that when they have something at the end that they're prepared to supply to the population, these trials have to be carried out. We have to have volunteers. It's absolutely commendable.
Most people's reaction have been, wow, okay, great, thanks. And I'm encouraged.
Lauren Coronado, NBC 7.